So, a question that I always see makes people a little uncomfortable when I ask is, who is your child when you're not around, when you're not watching, not when they know you might check, not when they're trying to stay out of trouble, but when it's just them in a moment making a decision with no immediate consequences attached. That version of your child, that's the real outcome of your parenting. And a lot of us were raised to believe that obedience is somehow the ultimate goal. If they listen, you're doing it right. If they stop the behavior, you handled it. If they get quiet, you won the moment. But quiet doesn't always mean understanding, and compliance doesn't always mean connection. Sometimes it just means that they've learned how to avoid being in conflict with you. A child can follow directions and still be confused, still feel disconnected, still not understand why any of it mattered in the first place. So, the better question isn't, did they listen? It's, what did they actually learn? And that's where the shift comes in. I'll do the right thing because someone told me to. Internal guidance says I'll do the right thing because I understand why it matters that I do the right thing. And one depends on you being present, while the other stays with them whenever they're not around you. And if we're being honest, a lot of parenting leans heavily on presence based control. If I'm there, they'll behave. If I say something, they'll stop. If I enforce it, they'll listen. And sure, that works until it doesn't. Like, think about when your kids are at school and maybe the teacher calls you and says, "Oh, your kid's acting up today." And your immediate thought is, "Well, my kid would never do that. They've never done that around me." Of course, they're not going to do it around you. But as they grow, and get older, more independent, more exposed to the world, they have to start making decisions in places where you're not. And that includes when they're at school or with their friends, online, in relationships. And in those moments, you can't just step in and raise your voice or enforce some kind of rule that you've established for them. So, what's guiding them outside of your presence, your physical presence? If the only system that they've learned is to do what you're told or face consequences, then once the authority figure disappears, so does the good behavior. And that's why fear doesn't scale. It works when you're present, but it falls apart when you're not. Connection, though, connection builds something internal. It creates a framework that your child can carry with them. And that's where your influence comes in. Influence isn't about control, it's about trust and clarity and consistency over time. And it starts with something that people don't always want to hear: your regulation. The way you show up in your kids' lives matters more than the words that you say. I know when I was younger, we'd always hear the phrase, "do as I say and not as I do." But that doesn't help. Because a lot of parents fail to actually teach their children what it is they're supposed to do. They just enforce the rules, enforce the punishments to stop the behavior in the moment. So when your child is overwhelmed or frustrated or pushing boundaries, they know how to stay grounded because they watched you stay grounded. You're doing more than just managing their behavior. You're modeling capacity. You're showing them what it actually looks like to experience intensity without losing complete control. Because your child isn't just listening to the words you're saying, they're studying how you behave. If your response to stress is to just start yelling and losing your shit, they learn that intensity. They learn that it leads to escalation. And if your response is calm but firm and clear, they learn that intensity can be managed. And that's real influence. Not what you say, but what you show, how you make yourself the example and model of the good behavior. Now, let's clear something up because this part gets misunderstood all the time. Choosing connection over control doesn't mean being passive, permissive, or soft to the point where nothing sticks, because boundaries still exist, rules still exist, expectations still exist. The difference is in how they are being delivered. Control based boundaries sound like do this or else, whereas connection based boundaries sound like this matters and here's why. One relies on you intimidating the child, while the other builds an understanding in this child. And when the child understands the reason behind the boundary, they're more likely to carry it with them and not repeat the behavior. And it's not because they're afraid, but because it makes sense. That's how you move from external control to internal guidance. That's how you stop being the only thing holding the structure together. Parenting at its core is leadership, not dictatorship. Leadership means being clear without being harsh, or being firm without being threatening, consistent without being rigid. It means being someone that your child can trust even when they don't like what you're saying. And they won't always like it. They're not supposed to. They're going to disagree, push back. They're going to test your limits, but that's a part of the process. But if the relationship is built on trust, they'll still consider your voice even when you're absent. And that's the real influence. When you zoom out, this becomes even more important because you're not just raising a child, you're raising a future adult, an adult who will one day have no curfew, no immediate consequences, no one standing over them telling them what to do. It's just the choices that they make. So, what do you want guiding those choices? Is it fear or understanding? Because fear says don't get caught, while understanding says this doesn't align with who I want to be. One is external, the other is rooted in identity. And identity based decisions are the ones that stick when nobody's watching. When the focus stays on controlling behavior in the moment, you might get short term results and the behavior stops for the moment. The situation ends. It looks like a success, but you miss the chance to build something deeper. Character isn't built in the loud, reactive moments. It's built in those quiet ones, the ones where your child has to decide for themselves what kind of person they want to be. And that decision is shaped over time, not by one rule or one consequence, but by the patterns that you've created and instilled in them, the habits that you help them to create. So if your child only behaves because you're there, then you're not influencing them, you're just surveilling them. And surveillance requires constant presence, constant monitoring, constant correction. It's exhausting for you and it's very limiting for them. It keeps you in the role of the enforcer instead of being a guide. But influence gives you something very different. It gives you a child who knows how to pause before reacting. It gives you a child who considers the impact or the outcome, who carries your voice internally, and not because they fear it, but because they value it. And that's the goal, not control in your presence, but character when you're absent. So the next time you feel the urge to control the moment, just take a second and ask yourself, am I building something that's going to last? Or am I just managing what's happening right now? Because parenting isn't about being obeyed, it's about being trusted. And if your authority only works when you're in the room, that's not good influence, it's surveillance. And surveillance doesn't raise thoughtful adults.